All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the GCA, I want to thank everyone for making time for this webinar today. We would be happy to take your questions later on after the presentations, but my name is Peter Doherty, and I'm Executive Director of the Greeting Card Association. And I'd like to welcome you to today's call on how the GCA and the industry can respond to COVID-19. And indeed, it's necessary for us to respond with everything going on and all the news coming out on a daily basis. Before I hand the program over to George White, GCA's president, and one of our key volunteers with the GCA Public Affairs Committee, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, participants' lines will be muted during the presentation. Today's presentation is also being recorded, and so later on it will be available for replay online. You will receive that information as a result of your registration today. And in order to ensure that there are no interruptions during the presentation, attendee lines will be muted. However, there will be an opportunity for questions later on. So please be sure to jot your questions down and have them ready. And if you think of something later, there will be opportunities for questions offline following the presentation as well. Our webinar agenda for today includes a few words from the president, George White, brief instructions from volunteer and executive committee member John Smythe for how to use the Q&A feature. Since many of you may be new to this system, this is one of the first few webinars that the GCA has hosted. And then a presentation from each of our three panelists, Peter Mellon, Rafe Morrissey, and Andy Meehan. You'll hear more about them in just a moment. But now it's my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, George White. George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Peter. Well, certainly COVID-19 is having an unprecedented impact on every aspect of our life. We're all suffering personally and professionally, but we're all in this together. The GCA is all about the community of our great industry, and therefore I think the GCA can certainly play a role in helping us all get through this together. First, we can certainly bring the community together because community engagement always yields positive results. I know that personally, and that's true. Anytime several of us get together and talk, good things happen. And second, we can provide useful information such as the website page we put together on our greetingcard.org site. And if you haven't been there yet, please let us know and we can send you the link. It's a dedicated link on the site. You can't see it just by trying to find it on the site, so you'll need a dedicated link. And that includes background and details on the new federal laws, links to useful sites, and other tools to help publishers address the challenges we are facing. And then this webinar, which I really appreciate John developing, and he's been the driving force in making it happen, will provide further information, and I really look forward to the discussion. And before they get started, I did also want to thank Peter and Rafe and Andy for the time that they're allocating to us today. We can all benefit from their insights. So without further ado, John, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the conferencing options you guys have. I know you've probably all been on Zoom calls and conferencing calls more than you've ever been in your life in the last couple of weeks. But if you look at the kind of the bottom part of the screen, you should see a Q&A button, and you will be able to submit all your questions there. And we'll get to those later, like George and Peter said. We can unmute your microphones. So if there's something specific that we see in the questions that we think would be better to be asked in person, we can go in and open it up. We'll let you know we're going to do that prior to it. We're going to try to keep our session to around 40 minutes. And then we'll just kind of cut it off, and we'll use your questions and some of the responses we get to maybe potentially schedule some more of these in the future. So let me just quickly introduce our panelists. We have Peter Mellon, Andy Meehan, who just jumped in, which is very exciting, and Rafe Morrissey. So Peter Mellon is an entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience working in online businesses and commercial real estate. He's also the founder and CEO of Netcito. It's an advisory group for entrepreneurs, and it's been an amazing resource for both Andy Meehan and myself. Peter also serves as the president of Georgetown University's Entrepreneurship Alliance and is the entrepreneur in residence at Georgetown University. Andy Meehan, which I lot of you probably already know. He is also the greeting card guru. He's got 25 years of experience in the greeting card and consumer product industry. His guru network has more than 30,000 participants, and he is currently a talent advisor for entrepreneurs and professionals. And his experience lies in consumer goods, branded and private labeling, consumer goods, greeting cards, stationery, giftwares, and connecting people. Rafe Morrissey, he is 20 years of public policy experience. In 2012, he became the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Greeting Card Association. The Public Affairs Committee really focuses on advancing the interests of the citizen mailer and the industry in the public sector. He supervises both legal and legislative outreach efforts for the GCA, and he was responsible for consolidating all the information and consolidating all the information that George mentions on the GCA website now. So to get started today, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take something out of the Netcito handbook. We start each meeting with 1 minute of silence to refocus our minds on what we're coming together to do, and in an attempt to leave behind the things that follow us into the meeting. I think this minute will be even more important during these weird times that we're all trying to work through. So if you can all just take a deep breath, close your eyes, and try to use the next minute just to center yourself. And I will tell you when we're going to restart. Okay, so hopefully you guys can feel a little calmer, and I will pass things over to Peter.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that pause. It's a bold move to incorporate a minute of silence on a webinar, and I don't know about everyone else, but the experience of having that pause in the middle of my day is a huge, great opportunity for a reset. And many thanks to John and to George and to Peter for organizing this, and thanks to all of you for being here. You may have noticed in John's comments that one of the things that he didn't share in my introduction is that you didn't hear greeting cards on my list of experience. So I'm coming to you from the perspective of Netcito, which is a network of CEO forums for entrepreneurs, where our members, who represent businesses that are anywhere from a few $100,000 up to 10 or 20 million in sales, share their biggest challenges with one another and provide game-changing feedback. And so convening these kinds of groups, I think helps to give me some perspective, which I can share with you in terms of this crisis and what's been happening. It was funny, I was actually in Philadelphia with Andy on the day that the sort of shutdown started to occur, and spent the weekend at home. And the whole thing to me was kind of feeling a little bit like a long weekend in its early stages, albeit a sort of strange one, until I got on the phone with one of our members. And I called him up and was just wanting to check in and see how he's doing. This is a guy who runs an events business that generates around $3 million a year in revenue. And this guy, who I had seen literally a week prior, shared with me that his business, which is a $3 million a year events business, had seen their revenue drop by close to 100%. He had gone from about $3 million a year down to what looked like it was going to be about $240,000 a year in revenue, almost literally overnight. And I think the lessons of that are sort of almost universal in terms of what we're all facing. There's a thought leader in the startup space named Steve Blank, who wrote really one of the Bibles for anyone starting a business or innovating, called The Lean Startup. Actually, it was a student who wrote it, but his quote is regarding coronavirus is, all of your assumptions about your customers, your sales cycle, and most importantly, your revenue burn rate and runway are no longer true. That was the reality that Rob was facing. I think it's the reality that a lot of us are facing right now with this crisis. I've got to imagine it's particularly true in the greeting card industry. And I think the more quickly we can come to grips with this reality, the better we're going to be able to survive the new normal. The next thing that happened, which I think was also really impressive with my friend Rob, is that he acted quickly. The thing that we talked about on this phone call a couple of days after the thing had started is, in essence, what's your lifeboat strategy? You know, you've got a company now that has seen 95 to 98% of its revenue evaporate. How are you going to survive the next 3 months, 6 months, potentially a year or a year and a half, depending on how this crisis unfolds? And I think that lifeboat strategy is probably true for all of us at this point, whether your revenue has dropped in the same severe way that Rob's dropped, or whether it's only slightly impacted, or in some cases, right, some of us hopefully are dealing with unexpected growth opportunities. The key points that we covered are, number one, plug into your current customers, figure out what's happening. He had one source of revenue that was going to generate 20 grand a month for him, whether he did anything or not. One of the first priorities that we talked about was getting on the phone and making sure that that was going to stay in place, or at least getting some sense of certainty about it. The next thing that he talked about and that we talked about was dealing with the revenue impact over the short, medium, and long term. What is this going to mean for surviving the next few months in the next year? And then finally, this is the hard part, how are you going to manage expenses in your runway? So in the case of Rob, he almost immediately let go of 90+% of his team. And since then has been dealing with the implications afterwards. But we're hopeful, that between taking these steps and some of the financing that we're going to be talking about later in this call, this is going to be the kind of runway that's going to enable him to be around on the other side of this. There's also buried in all of this, I think, some good news. This is one of my favorite quotes. We're all faced with a series of great opportunities, brilliantly disguised as insoluble problems. Ironically, John Gardner was a Secretary of Health and Human Services under LBJ, so he must have been telepathic to some extent. And so I do think the solution for this crisis, and the companies that survive and even thrive in the face of this, are going to be the ones that are most agile and nimble. People have to be, entrepreneurs and leaders in this organization need to be willing to react and take action over time periods that are measured in days rather than months or years. And depending on your ability to do that and to move very quickly, you may be able to, hopefully, will be able to capture opportunities that don't exist. And I think a lot of that is going to come from acts of empathy. Getting in touch with your customers, understanding who the people are that are impacted by this crisis, and looking at the unique gifts that you have as leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs to affect change here, and to be able to serve these markets and potentially do that in profitable ways. When it comes to Rob, this is his company here. within a couple of days, he had actually taken a step of taking this Range Rover, which you can see in the background here, and creating a raffle to give it away to Land Rover. He's already raised $15,000 doing that, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the steps that he's taking to pivot when faced with this opportunity. And I think if I was going to leave you with one thing, that would be it. That my hope for you is that this crisis becomes an opportunity to innovate, to bring the gifts, your gifts, to the world in new ways, and to figure out ways that you can adapt to this market that enable you not only to survive, but also to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, I had an unmute problem there. I think we're going to move on to Rafe now. He's going to walk us through some of the things that he's collected on the CARES Act and what's available up on the GCA website.
Thanks, John, and I appreciate the chance to participate today. And I know that this is a difficult time for everyone, and hope that first and foremost, everyone on the call and their families can stay safe and healthy. Clearly, the response to the COVID crisis has resulted in huge challenges and some opportunities for all businesses. And while exploring ways to adapt, it's important to recognize that Congress has taken extraordinary action to pass 3 rounds of legislation, with more on the way, to address the here and now needs of businesses throughout the country. So what I'd like to do is walk through some of the key highlights for you. The COVID crisis and response is truly unprecedented, and has resulted in 3 rounds of legislation that are historic in scope and complexity, that were enacted in an incredibly short period of time. The first of these was a Supplemental Appropriations Act that provided funding to bulk up federal agencies to respond to the health and economic impacts. The second, called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, focused on ensuring access for employees to sick leave, the ability to care for impacted family members, and unemployment insurance. And it was focused on businesses with 500 or fewer employees, but provided significant compliance flexibility for firms with 50 or fewer employees who could not continue operations if providing those benefits. It also ensured access to free testing for the virus. But the meat and potatoes legislation in all this was an 880-page, $2 trillion relief package called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act that was enacted less than 2 weeks ago. And this bill provides billions in economic assistance to individuals and businesses through expanded use of loans, grants, and tax relief intended to keep the economy going. Now, another factor to keep in mind here is that more relief is on the way from Congress, both to address the inevitable need for corrections to the earlier bills, but also to address concerns that will emerge moving forward. And there are a few key provisions of the bill that I think are most relevant for small companies and independent contractors that I'll touch on now. I'm not going to focus on the tax portions of the CARES Act, except to say that significant flexibility has been provided for deferring certain deadlines and payments, and businesses and independent contractors should consult their tax professionals to determine how these changes impact their individual circumstances. A key fact to keep in mind is that while the bill has been discussed in terms of relief for businesses, many of the key provisions are available to independent contractors, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals. And I think there are 2 programs in particular that are worth highlighting. The first of these is the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. And this program makes available $349 billion in loans to help small businesses and independent contractors maintain payrolls in the crisis. It will be in effect from February 15th through June 30th of 2020, and provides loans for up to 250% of the average payroll for those months for salaries under $100,000. Now, these funds may be used for compensation subject to the salary cap, continuation of healthcare benefits, rent, utilities, and interest on prior debt. And importantly, these loans are forgivable if payrolls and headcounts are maintained and used for covered purposes. The application period for small businesses and sole proprietors opened on April 3rd, and independent contractors and self-employed can apply beginning this Friday, April 10th. The second program is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and this program provides loans for up to $2 million and are available also for small businesses, independent contractors, sole proprietorships, and self-employed. There's no personal guarantee required for loans up to $200,000, and a $10,000 advance is immediately available while applications are processed. In addition, the program stipulates that first payments on the loan can be delayed until the end of the year. Generally, these loans can be used for operating expenses, but cannot be used to refinance indebtedness for pre-disaster obligations or to pay other loans, civil criminal fines, physical damage repairs, or dividends to owners or partners. What I do want to emphasize is that other than the $10,000 advance, the EIDLs, as they're called, are not forgivable. The last piece that I'll touch on is that the CARES Act provides significant expanded unemployment insurance benefits for many employers and made some who were previously ineligible for unemployment insurance, like the self-employed and independent contractors, newly eligible. These programs are administered by the states, and there'll be different procedures and requirements for each. So to sum up, I would say that COVID relief efforts are definitely a work in progress. There have been implementation issues with forms and procedures that are being worked through, and also issues with availability of lenders and differing requirements that are under review and being addressed. There is additional legislation to fix problems, that's a certainty, and additional relief legislation is also likely. At this very moment, Congress is considering an additional $250 billion increase to the program. And it looks like legislation to fix issues will be coming by the end of the month. The timing for new relief measures is less certain, but probably by the end of May if the need is clear, or maybe later into the summer if current measures appear to be working. I'll close by saying the GCA is monitoring developments in COVID relief very closely, and we've set up the special page that George mentioned on our website with information and links that we will be updating moving forward. So with that, I'll leave it there and certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rafe. Yeah, make sure you have any, if you have any specific questions, please use the questions and answers section. A few of you have already submitted some things that some have gotten answers, but we will recap them at the end for the group too. I think we're going to move on to Andy Meehan now. Andy, if you're ready.
Hey, everybody. Does the world look like this? For the last several weeks, probably. If we want to think forward, which is what my mindset is usually to think of, is how do we go in some way go forwards, because there's no back gear in this vehicle. John, are you moving? Can you move forward? Thanks. So I say that we're here to talk about possibilities, or at least the acknowledgement and how to embrace our new reality. Probably, you know, these are not going to be radical things immediately in this slide, but you know, B2C and e-commerce are definitely going gangbusters, as everybody knows. And many people think that e-commerce is hard to scale. But the one thing that happens in a crisis like this, when you have no choice, is you figure out what impossible, or how to have it be possible as opposed to impossible. On top of e-commerce, I've been thinking about local delivery networks. I'm sure that all of you have had versions of not just Amazon or other national chains, but also how your community or city is have entrepreneurs who are doing local deliveries, and maybe some chance for green cards to be a part of that. And then it also B2C, I want to express underserved segments or communities and where it would be appropriate to sell product and how to sell to that community. On the B2B side, everybody realizes that 80–90% of the stores are currently closed unless they're in grocery or pharmacy channels. But think about how you might support your retailers with actionable info and literally help them on how to apply for the grants and loans that are available. especially for retailers you believe or expect to survive, that if somebody if you're a small or medium-sized company, if you have a credit manager or a finance person who understands the loan application, maybe you have a call like this with your directly with customers, or as a webinar like this with your customers. Going forward, John, I just saw this this afternoon, from Retail Dive, a survey that says that 80% of US shoppers would like to be in stores with touchless checkouts. And maybe to think about the future of retail is that cleanliness and touchless technology will be very important. There's lots of things coming out like this. One of the things I'm thinking about, and hopefully you are, is being aware of ideas that are being tested. And if you have the ability to contribute talent, time, or resources when you can manage it, figure out how to be a part. For example, everybody's probably aware of Hallmark. About a week ago announced they would give a million cards, and that immediately became 2 million cards. And on at least today, they are saying that all 2 million cards were given out. And so, you know, you can't do this unless you are Hallmark, but in what way can you do this in a small way in your own community or your own particular niche in which you sell? Maybe you know about the Thinking of You month that Nikki Burton at Calypso created or promoted for the US Greeting Card Association, and she is changing the cadence to not once a year, but thinking of you every week and bridging social distance. And she posted about nursing home residents getting and wanting to see cards, particularly when they are A, shut in, and B, may not have a large family. There's 1.4 million patients in nursing homes, give or take, that are in this situation. How can you help Nikki bridge social distance through the Thinking of You week? I noticed a few days ago a Facebook page that was created on the 21st of March, which seems like that was 10 years ago, but it was about 2 weeks ago. And this was now has around 95,000 members and contributors from 98 countries. And the idea is, what do you see from your window? Now, this is not about greeting cards, but it is about emotion, connection, and so I'm going to call it art. In some cases, this is looking at a blank wall or a parking lot. In some cases, it's looking at a Greek island or a tropical rainforest in Australia. It's amazing. Think about what we or individually could do that could promote card sending using free tools to create larger communities. Usually when I'm talking about new markets, people are thinking about, you know, an export market or something like that, but a little further. What is a new market? So I'm sharing a company called Flickshot, which the founder, Marcus, both Peter and I know and met about 4 years ago. Marcus was a young man who was convicted for life, and then he got out of prison. And when we talk about 1.4 million nursing home residents, there's about 2.3 million prisoners who don't have access to social media or Facebook or the faces of their family. And so Marcus built a Flickshot to mail postcards from a phone app so that the people in their lives can receive, the prisoners can receive physical postcards. Now, when I met Marcus, I literally said, this is a brilliant idea. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Why didn't I think of that? Well, obviously I didn't have domain expertise. Like, I've never been to prison, although some of you may wish I was, but it's something that we never think about, and yet we could be a part of that as a new market. Things like choosing a Corona card template, sharing thoughts and feelings that are relevant and timely, whether that's online or in a physical card. So in this new reality, you have many things to do in terms of taking care of your lifeboat and the things that Peter and Rafe talked about to make some kind of stability immediately. But if you're an artist, creator, or writer, or if you have a staff or community, what is the relevant content for this new reality? Can you understand the emotions and connections that people will want now and in the future? For things like giving initiatives like the Hallmark 2 million cards, what can you do in your own niche or asset or in your local area? And lastly, I think you should consider inventorying both your physical assets, like Robert Kinsler with his Land Rover, how to take a piece of physical equipment that he could make money out of to make his runway work better, and also your intellectual assets, your creativity, your art, and so forth, and how can you redeploy or use that differently? So, it's possible that the world will go back something to what it went to or was before, but what will your business look like 6 months from now or 1 year from now? I'm here to help everybody in cards. I've been super fan of the card business my whole life. Please let me know how I can help, and I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Andy. Kind of a very good lead into what some of the, so we do, we're going to get to some questions. If you have some questions, please submit them now while I'm speaking. We have a few that we can go through. I think we want to continue this conversation, and a lot of what Andy hit on too. I think together we're a very strong and creative industry, so we can figure out how we can do this work together to make new things happen. So we do have the noted community, and the link is here, but you don't need to write that down. We'll send it out in an email. So the community is just really a place for all of us to get together and work through some of these problems. It is open to all makers, retailers, sales reps, and any type of industry support. It is a work in progress, so when you join, you'll immediately see things moving around. But please, after this, continue the conversation. This will be a great place for us to learn what the GCA can do to help everybody, and maybe produce some more of these webinars going forward. So let's take a look at some of the questions. Oops. It will let me. Okay. So there was one question that was centered around the fact that the country really has handled the pandemic in different ways in different states, and it was saying that some people have no ability to continue to ship. Some people have reduced capacity. Does the GCA have any way of looking at manufacturing and warehouse distribution across the industry? That is a tough question, but I think that is something that maybe is an interesting thing to bring into the forum of how we could maybe work together to solve some of these problems. George did try to answer this also, and obviously the best thing to do is to make sure you're following your state's health and business guidelines. To certainly do not go out and break the law and keep that curve down. So as things change, we can really start to look at the B2C angles and how our retailers, I think that was something that Andy and both Peter said, is how are our customers really handling this also? If we can't, let's talk to them. If we can't ship, let's see another way we can get things done. And then also the Bridge to Social Distance campaign too. How can we bring cards to the forefront? I know we were talking to Barbara from Daisy's out in San Francisco, and she is including cards with everything that she, online order that she gets. So that is a very interesting way of kind of looking at how to distribute cards, even though things are slowed down. Let's see, what other questions do we have? So many of the brick and mortar stores that we sell into are not in service currently. Does the GCA have any plans about how to help makers and many of the brick and mortar stores if they do shrink in the future? I think this is one of the things that I think everyone did hit on, and anybody can pipe in if they want to answer some of these things too. It's a tough for anybody to look ahead. I think Andy's picture of all those roads crossing and signs going in each direction. This is going to be tough for the next couple of years, or next couple of months to even see where things are going. And I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. So a lot of this is going to be looking at where you are, keeping in contact with your retailers. Peter, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to just comment on that point. I mean, this is less from the perspective of what the GCA can do and more from the perspective of what you can do as an owner. But I think one of the key insights that we've been leaning on and sharing with our entrepreneurs is that I think one of the greatest enemies for any business owner in this environment right now, or anyone who's running a business, is denial. Sort of pretending that the reality is something other than what it actually is. And so when it comes to brick and mortar stores, like, the reality is exactly what Jason articulated in his question, which is that they may not survive the current climate. They're probably not buying from you now. And I just think it's worth underlining, like, and asking the question of what does it mean to truly address that reality? Perhaps part of it is, probably a big part of it is what Andy talked about, right? In terms of maybe it's a question of shifting focus and looking to online retail and starting to create new beachheads there. Maybe there are other ways to go to direct to consumer, but there's probably a decent chance that, at least for now, that well is dry. And so, this may be a good time to start exploring new wells.
Thank you. So we have one request to repeat some information. Could you please repeat the info regarding the PPP applications for blank on April 10th? So Rafe, what is happening on April 10th for the PPP?
On April 10th, they will open the application process to independent contractors and self-employed. So it was just a phase in. They focused for the first week on small businesses and sole proprietorships, and the eligibility for independent contractors, or the application window, will open on Friday.
That was a helpful thing. And I started talking and it told me I was muted. So I think that was the questions that were kind of open, and I think would be good for the group. One of the things that I think that the GCA, and it kind of relates to the one question of trying to keep some type of normalcy. One of the missions of the GCA is to continue to celebrate the industry and the products. So the decision was made to keep Noted going. So we are going to continue the product awards for Noted. We have a little bit of runway left. The submissions end on Friday. So we'd love anybody that's still out there and thinks that they want to be part of this. We're going to do everything virtually. All of the judges that we had on board prior to Noted having to be canceled are still on board, and you can see them here: Dan Kotler, Barbara Mooney, Sarah Schwartz, Chelsea Slovak, Audrey Woolen, and Tori Wright. We're all going to just do this instead of at Noted. We're going to do it socially distanced and online. So we do have that set up. So please visit either the Paper Chronicles or the GCA website if you'd like to take part, and stay tuned for announcements through the GCA and the Noted Instagram to see what we're going to do for the actually presentation of the awards. We're going to shooting for early May. And it's going to be in combination with the Noted pitch program. So this is one thing that GCA is attempting to do to try to keep some normalcy, keep us all connected. And I think that wraps us up for now. If anyone else, like I said, please go to.
Nikki's got a question about.
Something else pop in.
Nikki's got a question about 1099 workers. Rafe, I don't know if you can see the questions or not, but she's looking for information about, for our sales reps and others who are self-employed, we might use freelancers. Where should they go to see how they can apply for that $10,000 emergency loan, and et cetera?
So the website has links to the SBA site and the application forms. I would say that you want to think through whether you go for the Paycheck Protection Program or the EIDL loan. I have heard that of the two, the EIDL loan, even though the grant is supposed to be made immediately available, that's been a little more cumbersome in practice. The PPP, Payroll Protection Program loan, may be a better option. And the other advantage is that it is also forgivable, whereas the EIDL loan, it's only the $10,000 that is forgivable. And that's really on the basis of if the loan for the full amount is denied. So I would steer towards the PPP program unless there's some specific advice that individuals have from their tax professional that the other loan is a better option.
John, Rafe, Peter Doherty, we had a question that came to us via email, if we still have a minute. It was a question from an individual that may be on the phone now. Her question was whether there was an upper age limit that would disqualify a person from receiving salary reimbursement due to losses during COVID-19. Rafe, do you have any information on that?
I've seen no restrictions with regard to age. The only restriction I've seen is that the salary loan amount is capped at a proportionate share up to $100,000. So, and it's based on 250% of payroll if you're in that circumstance, but it would only cover the salaries up to $100,000. So anything above that would not be allowable under the loan program. But I've seen nothing with regard to age requirements.
All right, that's excellent. Very good news. John, anything to wrap us up?
No, I think that's all. Please join us on the in the Noted community. You'll get that link in an email for everybody that signed up. Yeah, just stay healthy and let us know what else.
John, there's a couple of other questions that just came in.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Now's the time.
Can you see them, John?
Those are both for Rafe. Can Rafe see the questions?
Well, yeah, I can read them for you, Rafe. Can you apply both the SBA and PP loans simultaneously?
You are eligible to apply for the PPP loan and the EIDL grant. They are related in the sense that the $10,000 advance would decrease the amount that can be forgiven on the PPP loan. There are different restrictions for use of the funds that you want to be mindful of. And in general, they want you to use the funds from the PPP program for the specified uses and use the EIDL funds for something different. But it is possible to apply for both.
And the second question was, does the fast track $10,000 advance from the EDIL require a completed SBA EDIL application with all its documented requirements being submitted?
My understanding is that it's provided on making the application. So yes, you would need to provide the application materials, but the theory is that you're supposed to get the advance while the application is being considered. So obviously you don't need to have approval of the application in order to get the money. And I will say that there is anecdotal experience to indicate that the process for getting that $10,000 is moving more slowly than it should. But all this is very new and it's a work in progress. So hopefully those resources will free up quickly and the money will flow. I know that's the intent of the program and the people that are putting it together.
Rafe, I'll add on that. Have you heard anybody that has received that grant yet?
I have not, and I actually saw a note from a leader of one of the small business associations in Washington, D.C. complaining of the fact that nobody in their network had received the $10,000 grant. So I do know that it's a challenge, but definitely something that representatives of small businesses and organizations are highlighting and hopefully can be corrected soon.
Okay, another question came in. Do you have to apply for the PPP through a bank?
Yes, you have to apply through a lender, and there is a list of lenders that are available on the SBA site that's linked to off of our page. There are some larger institutions that have had some problems. Bank of America, I understand that Wells Fargo has exhausted the number of loans that it can provide. I have heard that community banks seem to be a better resource for getting the loans. So you will need to identify a loan provider through the list, or if you're connected with a financial institution, you should certainly check there. There's also a lot of discussion about making some of the online loan providers like Quicken Loans, et cetera, authorized to disperse loans. And I think that's something that hopefully we'll see soon. There's a lot of discussion about it, but right now it's only through lenders that are approved for the program in a physical sense.
There was a follow-up on that. They're hearing that a lot of lenders are only taking their current customers. Is anyone aware of people taking new customers?
Again, I don't have specific lenders to recommend beyond what's on the list, but I think that is an issue that I've heard in a general sense that will be addressed. So we'll continue to monitor any advice or guidance we get on availability of lenders that we can point to on the website. We will update it there for sure.
There's actually a very good article in the New York Times today, which kind of it's a play-by-play on what the benefits are and how to apply. And there's a list of a couple of banks that are taking new customers for that. So let's see, that's Joyce. Whoever, and I was an anonymous person that asked that. Whoever asked that, I would check out that article because it had a list of a couple in there.
Very good.
All right, I think this is if you got any other questions, get them in now.
Yeah,
Nope.
and we would be,
no,
do we have another? Was there another?
No, something popped in. It was just a thank you. So
Okay. Well, and we wanted to thank everyone that joined us today. And we'd be happy to answer any additional questions offline. So please keep the questions coming. You can send those directly to gca@greetingcard.org. And if any questions are of a more detailed nature, we'll be happy to address those details offline. But you may now disconnect from this session if you'd like. Have a great day, and thanks again to all of our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, John, Peter, Andy, Rafe. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Welcome.
Everybody stay healthy.
You too.
You too. Thank you.